The story begins with our protagonist, Makoto Kurabayashi, who let out a frustrated groan as he stared at his phone screen. Once again, there were no new job requests for the entire week. His part-time housekeeping job had been painfully dry lately, and it was starting to get to him. At school, things weren't much better. His friends constantly teased him, joking that his so-called job didn't even exist since he never seemed to get any clients. One of them laughed and suggested that it was obvious people would rather hire adults than some high school student. Kurabayashi tried to brush it off, but deep down, it stung. The conversation suddenly took a strange turn when one of the boys began daydreaming out loud. He talked about how amazing it would be to be taken care of by someone called Hota-sensei. Kurabayashi frowned, clearly confused. He had never heard that name before. "Who's that?" he asked. His friend smirked and pointed ahead. Right at that moment, Rumiko Hota-sensei walked past them. Almost instantly, the mood around them changed. Female students greeted her warmly, complimenting her outfit, especially her cute shoes. She responded with a bright, friendly smile, radiating confidence and charm. Kurabayashi's friend leaned in and whispered, explaining that Hota-sensei was incredibly popular. She wasn't just beautiful, she was cheerful, kind, and made every class enjoyable. Some students from other schools even admired her. But according to him, what truly made her stand out was her mature charm. Kurabayashi stared, completely captivated. Without thinking, he muttered under his breath about how big her chest was. His friend burst out laughing and immediately called him a closet pervert. Flustered, Kurabayashi quickly denied it, waving his hands in panic. Before he could say anything else, a calm voice interrupted them. "You two are being a little loud." Both boys froze. Slowly, they turned around, and there she was, Hota-sensei. Their faces went pale as they immediately bowed and apologized. But instead of scolding them, she simply smiled gently and said it was fine as long as they understood. Up close, Kurabayashi felt his heart race. She was even more beautiful than he had imagined. But then something caught his attention. One of the buttons on her blouse looked like it was barely holding on, as if it might pop open at any second. He hesitated. Should he tell her? No, that would definitely make it seem like he'd been staring at her chest. Unable to decide, he stayed silent. Hota-sensei waved goodbye and walked away, leaving Kurabayashi standing there frozen in place. His friend immediately teased him again, laughing about how he couldn't stop staring. Later that night, Kurabayashi stood at home, carefully steaming a shirt. His mind wandered as he worked. Maybe he really should quit his part-time job. It wasn't like he was getting any work anyway. He glanced at the clock and sighed, thinking about his older brother, Shinichi, who was late again. He wished his brother wouldn't push himself so hard. Just then, his phone rang. Thinking it was Shinichi, he answered casually, but instead, a woman's voice spoke from the other end. She apologized for calling so late and asked if she was speaking to Kurabayashi's son. Confused, he realized this wasn't his brother. It was a call from the home help service. She began explaining the situation, and Kurabayashi listened carefully. A last-minute request had come in. Without hesitation, he accepted. Not long after, Kurabayashi stood in front of a large apartment building, staring up at it nervously. This was it, his first real job in a long time. Room 403. His heart pounded as he stood outside the door. He straightened his posture, trying to calm himself, and pressed the doorbell. Silence. No response. A slight sense of panic crept in. Did he get the wrong place? He quickly pulled out his phone and checked the details again. Client name, Hota. Huh? Before he could fully process it, the door suddenly swung open. Smack! It hit him square in the face. He fell back onto the ground, dazed. From inside, a shocked voice called out. Hota-sensei stood in the doorway, eyes wide in surprise. She quickly apologized and asked if he was okay. Kurabayashi groaned, holding his head, insisting that he was fine. As she leaned closer to check on him, her loosely buttoned blouse shifted slightly, revealing more than he expected. Startled, he jumped back and blurted out her name. She froze. Then her expression changed. Noticing his school uniform, she narrowed her eyes. "Are you you one of my students?" Panicking, Kurabayashi stood up straight and loudly introduced himself. "Makoto Kurabayashi from Majo High." Before he could finish, she grabbed his tie and yanked him inside, slamming the door shut behind them. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Hota-sensei scolded him, calling him an idiot for shouting her name like that. If anyone overheard, rumors would spread instantly, and if people thought she was inviting students into her apartment, her career would be over. Kurabayashi apologized repeatedly, bowing over and over again. She sighed deeply, rubbing her temples. "I'm hungover, and your yelling isn't helping." Kurabayashi blinked in surprise. Looking at her closely now, he realized something shocking. This wasn't the same flawless teacher from school. Her hair was messy, her makeup was smudged, her clothes were wrinkled. She looked completely different. She complained about not being able to find her phone, and Kurabayashi quickly realized the truth. She must have made the service request while drunk. When she finally found it, panic spread across her face. "This is bad," she muttered. Immediately, she decided to cancel the service. But Kurabayashi stepped forward and pleaded with her. This was his first job in a month. He couldn't lose it. At first, she refused, but then, "A cancellation fee applies," he said. She froze. "A cancellation fee?" He nodded. "Same-day cancellations cost 100% of the fee." She buried her face in her hands. What a nightmare. After a long pause, she sighed in defeat. "Fine, just for today." Kurabayashi felt a wave of relief. Hota-sensei explained that teachers didn't earn much, so wasting money wasn't an option. She told him to clean everything perfectly if he wanted to repay her. He confidently agreed. But the moment he stepped further inside, he froze. The apartment was a complete disaster. Trash, clothes, bottles, everywhere. Hota-sensei laughed awkwardly. "Pretty bad, huh?" Kurabayashi could only nod. He immediately got to work. As he cleaned, she casually mentioned she was going to take a bath and told him not to touch her computer. He nodded, but something from earlier still bothered him. After hesitating, he suddenly spoke up. Can you give me the bra you're wearing right now?" Silence. She froze. "What?" she said slowly. "Are you going to sniff it or something?" Flustered, Kurabayashi panicked and waved his hands. "No, the button came off, that's all." She stared at him for a moment, then smirked. "Oh, I thought you were a pervert." He sighed in relief. She shrugged and walked toward the bathroom. "I'll give it to you later." As she disappeared inside, Kurabayashi continued cleaning. But suddenly, he picked up a towel and froze. Inside it was her bra. His face turned bright red. Quickly, he rolled it back up, trying to calm himself. "Why do women leave things like this around?" he muttered. Just then, the bathroom door opened. "Here's the bra." He turned around, and his brain stopped working. There she stood, wrapped only in a towel, steam rising around her. For a moment, it didn't feel real. She casually mentioned which clothes were already washed and went back inside completely unfazed. Meanwhile, Kurabayashi stood there, heart racing and trying to regain control of himself. Time passed. He focused on cleaning, and eventually, the entire apartment was spotless. On top of that, he had even prepared dinner. When Hota-sensei came out again, now dressed casually, she noticed the food immediately. Her eyes lit up when she saw the pickled vegetables. She eagerly took a bite. Kurabayashi watched nervously. Then, a tear rolled down her cheek. He panicked, thinking it tasted bad, and quickly tried to take the plate away. But she grabbed his hand firmly. Her voice softened. "It reminds me of my grandmother." She explained how she hadn't tasted something like this in years. These were precious memories. Kurabayashi relaxed, realizing she wasn't upset, she was moved. Overwhelmed, she even held his hand and asked if his hands were her grandmother's, completely carried away by emotion. He shouted in confusion, snapping her back to reality. Embarrassed, she apologized. Then her expression changed. She looked at him seriously. She began listing his qualities. Hard-working, sincere, kind, and skilled. Then, without hesitation, she made a decision. "I've decided you'll be my personal housekeeper." Kurabayashi froze. "What?" She nodded confidently. Before he could react, she had already written up a detailed contract, 12 clauses long. She handed it to him. After reading it, he hesitated, then signed. She beamed with excitement. But suddenly, her expression turned dark. Leaning closer, her voice dropped. "If you break this contract, I'll drag you down with me." Kurabayashi froze. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was something dangerous. As she leaned even closer, teasing him and reminding him to keep everything a secret, he felt completely overwhelmed. Then his alarm rang. Kurabayashi shot up in bed, gasping for air. Sweat covered his face. It was all a dream. Later that morning at school, one of Kurabayashi's friends immediately noticed something was off. "You look dead for a Monday," he pointed out. Kurabayashi forced a weak smile and admitted he'd had a strange dream. But deep down, he couldn't deny it. It wasn't just strange, it was amazing. A faint blush crept onto his face as he muttered that he actually felt a little guilty about it. His friend tilted his head, completely confused. "Why would you feel guilty about a dream?" Kurabayashi didn't answer, because even now, 2 days later, something about it felt too real. His first visit to Hata-sensei's apartment, the contract, everything. A sudden chill ran down his spine. What if, he thought, none of it actually happened? What if it was all just part of that dream? He quickly shook his head. No way. There was no way he'd imagined something that detailed, right? Just then, his heart skipped a beat. Down the hallway, Rumiko Hata-sensei appeared, walking gracefully as always, greeting students with her bright, flawless smile. For a split second, their eyes met. Panic. Without thinking, Kurabayashi spun around and bolted in the opposite direction. His friend stared in confusion as Kurabayashi ran like his life depended on it. Trying to calm himself, Kurabayashi told himself to remember what she looked like at the apartment, messy, hungover, completely different. But instead, his mind replayed the dream version, which only made things worse. By the time he stopped, he was completely out of breath, collapsing in the hallway, face burning red. His friend rushed over, asking what was wrong. Desperately, Kurabayashi made a decision. He would avoid her completely. No looking, no interaction, nothing. His friend nodded, thinking the problem was solved, but Kurabayashi knew the truth. It had only just begun. Avoiding her turned out to be impossible. No matter where he went, he saw her. In the hallway, outside classrooms, even from a distance. It wasn't bad luck. It was because she stood out too much. Her beauty, her energy, everything about her naturally drew attention. Kurabayashi frowned, realizing something strange. Why didn't I notice her like this before? And then it hit him. Her face, her figure, her charm. Once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee it. And knowing her other side, the messy, lazy version from her apartment, only made things more confusing. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Get it together. But before he could leave, someone grabbed his arm, hard. He was yanked into an empty room. Slam. The door shut behind him. Before he could react, he was pinned. Hata-sensei had him pressed against a file cabinet, her leg blocking his escape. Her eyes were sharp, intense. "Why do you keep staring at me?" she demanded. Kurabayashi froze. She reminded him coldly they were not supposed to interact at school, and if he thought a simple apology would fix things, she would cancel their contract immediately. Panic surged through him. He couldn't tell her about the dream. So instead, the truth slipped out. "Because you're beautiful." Silence. Hata-sensei blinked, caught off guard. Then, a small smile formed. "Well, that's only natural." Her tone softened slightly. "People are drawn to beautiful things." She leaned closer, dangerously close. "I'll forgive you this time," her voice dropped, "but you know what happens if you mess up again." A pause. "If anyone finds out about us," her eyes narrowed, "I'll drag you down with me." The door slamming behind him. He stood there, trembling. His mind was blank. "She pinned me with her leg." When he returned to class, his friend greeted him like nothing had happened. "What took you so long?" Kurabayashi forced a laugh, saying he had a rough morning. Then he noticed something. Homeroom hadn't started yet. Apparently, the teacher was late. Right as he said that, a teacher walked in. The class quieted down. The teacher explained that their usual homeroom teacher, Kimura-sensei, had to return to his hometown, which meant they had a new assistant homeroom teacher. The door opened. Rumiko Hotta-sensei stepped in. Kurabayashi froze. No way! This couldn't be real. For a moment, he thought she had planned this, but when he looked at her face, she looked just as shocked. Later that day, Kurabayashi rushed through the streets, realizing he had taken too long getting ready. It had already been a week since she became his assistant homeroom teacher. He remembered how pale she looked that first day, before quickly regaining her composure. Even now, things were still awkward, but her strict yet kind messages had helped him stay focused. Soon, he arrived at her apartment for his second job. He rang the bell, the door opened, and he froze. Sensei? She was wearing something unexpected, a yoga outfit. Stretching lightly, she smiled. "I'm doing yoga," she said cheerfully. Kurabayashi blinked. "Oh, that exercise with fancy stretches?" She laughed, admitting she had started again because she'd gained a little weight. "Don't mind me," she said casually. "Just do your work." He nodded and got started, but focusing was impossible. Behind him, Hotta-sensei struggled through her poses, groaning, breathing heavily, making sounds that completely destroyed his concentration. Even when he looked away, her voice alone distracted him. Eventually, she collapsed onto the mat. "I'm too stiff." Kurabayashi sighed in relief. "Is it over?" "No." She called him over. Confused, he approached. "Push my lower back," she said. "Huh?" Reluctantly, he placed his hands on her. "Lower! Harder!" His brain short-circuited. He could feel her warmth. Too close. Way too close. Flustered, he tried to step away, but she refused. Laughing, she declared he'd be helping her for the next 30 minutes. And just like that, Kurabayashi became her personal yoga assistant. After the session, she stretched happily, looking refreshed. "Thanks," she smiled. Meanwhile, Kurabayashi looked like he had just survived a war. He silently swore, "Never again." But she leaned closer. "Having a partner makes it easier. Help me again sometime?" He panicked. "No," then quickly corrected himself. "Only if I wear earplugs and gloves." She blinked, confused. After school, Kurabayashi disappeared as usual. This time he headed somewhere specific, the rooftop. He found a key left in the door and stepped outside. The open sky stretched endlessly before him. "It feels amazing!" he shouted. "Hey!" He froze. Hotta-sensei stood behind him. Switching to a casual tone, she asked how he got up there. He explained about the key. Realizing she had left it, she thanked him when he returned it. "This is my lunch spot. Go back to class." She turned to leave. "Can I stay?" he asked. She smirked. "What are you, a loner?" He panicked. "No, I just want to read." After a pause, she allowed it. They sat together. The wind blew gently. When she asked about his lunch, he showed her. She claimed she had already eaten. But then she pulled out a sandwich, a scone, a croissant, a curry bun. Kurabayashi stared. "That's not already eaten." She pouted, saying her lunchbox was too small for her image. Then her eyes locked onto his food, sparkling, hungry. She leaned closer. Too close. Flustered, he offered her a rice ball. She froze. "Really?" He nodded. She took a bite and lit up instantly. "This is amazing!" His heart pounded. "I love your cooking." He froze. Wait, that came out wrong. Before things could settle, a strong gust of wind blew. Her dress lifted. Both of them panicked. Trying to act normal, Kurabayashi muttered about the wind messing up his hair. She stared at him. "You're not calm at all."